back to my channel. In this video I'm going to carry on reviewing naming adult autism from where I finished off from last week. I'm feeling quite pleased because I've just noticed that I've got up to just, I think last time I looked it was 401 subscribers. So thank you to all my new subscribers and everyone who's subscribed. That is a great number. I'm really pleased. 401, and that's a really lovely colour as well because I've got synesthesia. 4 is a red, so it's like I don't know, it's just a nice number. So thanks to all my subscribers. Yeah, I feel really happy that it's just really nice. Thank you. So yeah, so I'm going to carry on reviewing naming adult autism for where I finished off last week. The next book that James McGrath talks about in naming adult autism is Margaret Atwood's futuristic novel, Oryx and Crake, which was written in 2003, and it's the first instalment of a trilogy. I haven't read that book. I hadn't actually heard of it at all before reading Naming Adult Autism. But this novel, it satirises the marginalisation of the humanities against the economically lucrative STEM subjects. So the STEM subjects are science, technology, engineering and mathematics. And in this novel, humans are divided between the word people and the numbers people. Neurotypicals and autistics. So neurotypicals are the word people, and autistics are the number people. And Crake, the one of the central characters in it, he's a numbers person. He's an amoral scientist, and he almost totally obliterates the human race and replaces it with the Quakers. Sounds a bit like a religious the religious movement, the Quakers with a Q, but this time with a C, the Quakers. But he replaces it with the Quakers, resulting in the removal of art and literature from the world. And Quake, he's very, very stereotypical. He embodies the worst stereotypes of autism in literature, really. He has a total lack of empathy, and he has a savant talent in computer coding. And he wants to reorder the world into a sort of autistic kind of utopia, as it were, where autistics are ruling the world, and they've got rid of word-obsessed neurotypicals and placed them with autistics who are all like number lovers and yeah. So we can see in this book, I mean, I haven't read it, I don't know if I really want to read it, but some really harmful stereotypes being put forth there. This idea that autistics are all super nerdy number lovers. Of course, there's nothing wrong with loving numbers or being great at numbers, but it's this idea that that autistics by definition are by default number lovers and great at maths and systemizing, and look down on art and literature as sort of somehow beneath them. And this idea that neurotypicals are all into arts and humanities, and that these two camps are kind of at loggerheads with one another. In actual fact, I don't know if any of you have heard of the Aspie supremacy movement. Obviously they don't call themselves that, but there are some people with what used to be diagnosed as Asperger's, a kind of, I don't know, sort of unofficial grouping. I don't know if they really have a formal structure or anything. I don't think they've really organised into anything, but there are some people who, with what used to be diagnosed as Asperger's, who take this rather supremacist viewpoint, hence why they're called Aspie supremacists. I don't personally really, they're called Aspie supremacists, and they often think of themselves as superior to non-autistics, and that autism is like a next stage of evolution and things like that. And this book, Oryx and Quake, it seems to be sort of like representing that kind of that movement in inverted commas. I don't think it's like a properly organised movement or anything. It's like an informal grouping of people who associate as Aspie supremacists. I don't think they would actually call themselves that, but that's what people who aren't Aspie supremacists tend to call them, Aspie supremacists. I think that's to me that is just really like a really pernicious way of viewing things. Really, it's really deeply problematic, and almost reeks a bit of eugenics. Almost, seeing like people are superior to one another and stuff like that. Obviously, I really struggle with maths. I really struggle with numbers. I severely struggle with maths and numbers. My brain just can't compute. It doesn't understand numbers. Basically, I have a learning difficulty in that area. What's called dyscalculia, although when I was back in the 90s, they didn't have a name for it. They didn't have a name for a maths learning difficulty, but that's what it is. It's not just, for me, it's not just a slight difficulty with it. I do not understand, I do not have a number sense, but I am really, really good at words and language, and that's the kind of domain where I live. So I am very much a word person, as is James McGrath, the autistic author of Naming Adult Autism. So that's ironic, because we would fall into the word group, which in the book is the neurotypicals. But I'm a word person. I have no understanding of numbers. And indeed, there are many autistics who struggle with numbers. For every autistic who excels at numbers, there's going to be another autistic who has dyscalculia or just can't understand numbers, and who might conversely be really great at words and understanding language. And there's going to be a lot of autistics out there as well who are really interested in the humanities and in culture and things like that. So this book, Margaret Atwood's Oryx and Crake, is deeply problematic, and I think does a massive disservice to the autistic community in putting forth these highly pernicious and deeply damaging stereotypes, and the idea that autistics want to reorder the world and kind of get rid of like neurotypicals is a really harmful notion. It's like deeply troubling. I would hope that only a very minority of autistics fall into that Aspie supremacist group. I think unfortunately this minority is trying to hijack the neurodiversity movement, and while the neurodiversity movement does have good intentions, and I agree with its basic premises, and which are laudable, I think, but I do think that unfortunately a minority of really outspoken Aspie supremacists, for want of a better name, are trying to like take over the movement, and they kind of are. Some of them do tend to try and exploit these really harmful stereotypes. I like to hope that they are a minority, but this idea that autistics are like by definition great at STEM subjects, and people like Simon Baron-Cohen while Simon Baron-Cohen isn't an Aspie supremacist, I wouldn't call him that, but he doesn't do neurodiversity any favours, really, I think, the whole neurodiversity movement, because this idea that all autistics are really good at maths and science, and by default aren't interested in arts and culture and the sort of humanities, is just deeply damaging. So I don't think I really want to read that book. McGrath, he says that the book represents a shift in which the emphasis on autism and ability has begun to attract greater cultural attention than CANA and autism as an impairment. while obviously it's kind of important to not to kind of just focus on the negatives and everything. I think if it goes too far the other extreme and just focuses on ability, and often like really extreme abilities that most autistics do not have, like really extreme abilities, this can be just as damaging as say if you were only to focus on like the negatives. You need a sort of like a balanced approach because it just doesn't represent. It's like they often focus on either one or two extremes, like really, yeah, and you just need balance. You need to represent the whole diversity of autism. So, yeah, so I'm going to move on to video number 2 now to carry on talking about naming adult autism by James McGrath. So, moving on to video number 2 now.